listening to episode 80 of Mitolife Radio. I'm your host, Matt Blackburn. Today's show, what would I do if I had cancer? And I'm very confident that I'll never experience that condition, but I'm wording it this way largely for legality reasons because we're in a draconian society currently where we can't just speak freely. We have to speak certain ways or else we'll get in trouble. So that's largely why I named the podcast that. Otherwise, I'd name it something else. But I have recommendations that are very practical. A lot of these things have obvious links to not only cancer, but multiple other diseases. And I'm really excited to make this episode because I worked in the cannabis industry for a few years in California, and the Rick Simpson oil was very popular and kind of touted as like a cure-all kind of thing. At least that's what I noticed. That was kind of the vibe about RSO. And I would deliver multiple syringes of that oil. Either high THC or high CBD or a combo to people that were very sick. And I would actually go to their house and hand deliver this to them and see their condition and see, what their environment's like. And not 99%, 100% of every person's environment that I went to was absolutely horrendous, and definitely supportive of cancer. I didn't see one thing that anyone was doing right over all of those deliveries that I did to people with RSO. None of them were doing anything right. And that's why I have this podcast, because it's a great way to share this information with people. I am very familiar with the brick wall or the glazing of the eyes when you start to talk about solutions. And for whatever reason, people don't believe it or they're apathetic is probably the more likely scenario. And so I think most people, unfortunately, that are diagnosed with a disease like cancer are already on that track, and they've been on that track for so long that to implement a lot of the things that I'll share in this episode is very, very unlikely unless they have a very strong, supportive group of friends and family that understand that God designed our body perfectly. There's zero defects. It does heal itself and reorganize itself and regenerate itself to perfection every time when we give it what it needs and we take away what it doesn't. And people wouldn't believe the amount of toxicity that we're dealing with today. The light toxicity, as I'll talk about, the water, the non-native EMFs, the food, the air, the iron overload. There's so many factors that are contributing not only to this condition, but many others: diabetes, heart disease, dementia, anxiety disorders, mood disorders, memory loss, fatigue, autoimmune, acne, psoriasis, vitiligo, all sorts of conditions. I mean, you name it, it's just an imbalance in the body. And I see a lot of people going to, in the alternative health community, either going to herbal remedies, homeopathic remedies, alkaline water, alkaline diet, vegan diet, plant-based diet. And I really think that's the wrong track, especially in the context of cancer, but with any condition. That's not the way to go. And so I'm just going to jump right in. If I were diagnosed with cancer, I would assess my environment first. So I'd look around. at my environment and see how toxic it is. See it for what it is. Look at the light, first of all, because that's probably the easiest thing to fix. Look at the beneficial light that I'm receiving and look at the harmful light that I'm receiving. And look at the time that I'm receiving that light, because that matters as well. So the people that I mentioned earlier, where I went to their apartment or their home that had cancer, were relying on RSO or Rick Simpson oil or this one remedy to try to help them, while they're most likely doing everything else wrong. Just the light environment was horrendous. I looking at the ceiling and seeing what type of bulbs these people were using, they were LEDs, which are the worst. And if someone's in an apartment complex, those are just standard. They have LEDs up there because they're energy efficient, but they're not good for your body. They emit a stronger non-native EMF field, and they also have a flicker to them, which fatigues the body. And the light spectrum is really bad. There's almost no red or infrared and tons of blue wavelength, which has been associated with cancer, general mitochondrial degradation, multiple diseases, when it's out of balance with the other colors. So what I generally recommend for clients is that they replace all of their bulbs in their home with A19 red or orange incandescent bulbs. You can get those on lightbulbs.com, that website. They're kind of illegal right now because, again, we're in a draconian system here. So you go to Home Depot, you go to your hardware store, they're going to be very hard or impossible to find. So most likely you have to order your light bulbs online. And I recently interviewed Adam Bergstrom, and they use bug lights, which are yellow bulbs. So red, orange, or yellow bulbs are much safer to use, non-LED, than regular, they say cool or warm light, but the cool light is actually the worst. You want more warm spectrum, and that's measured in Kelvin. But the cool light is actually a lot more harmful to you. So it's a tricky wording there, because it's not cool, it's inflammatory to the body. You see that. So that's a really easy mitigation, just to switch all of those out. And hopefully it's the regular sockets. If it's the smaller ones, I've had trouble finding good quality lights. Forget the name of those, but they're the smaller little light sockets that are sometimes in houses on the walls. So switch out all the bulbs for those. And if you can't do that for whatever reason, then just get really heavy shades and don't use them at all during the day. And at night, try to not get them directly on your skin or in your eyes, and wear blue blocking glasses. So I'm trying to give kind of tiers here because we do the best we can, but for an extreme situation like cancer, I would definitely throw out all the bulbs in the entire house and switch them all out for red and orange bulbs. Orange is good, like in the kitchen if you need to see more. Red is definitely better for the bedroom, where you don't need that much light. You can use a yellow light if you need to read, but even better, my friend Andrew at Gemba Red has multiple different red light devices that you can plug in. So he has a little reading light. He just came out with automatic sensor lights for the bathroom that turn on when it sense movement. And that's a great way to go. So here in the house, we use a combination of the bulbs and the Gemba Red lights. And he makes little strip lights that you can wrap around in your bathroom, in the hallways, wherever you need it. and use as many of the Gemba red lights as you can. And I have a study here that I'd like to reference from the Barcelona Institute for Global Health. And the title of it is Study Links Night Exposure to Blue Light with Breast and Prostate Cancer. So they actually found that people exposed to high levels of blue light from white LEDs or tablet and phone screens had a 1.5 to 2-fold higher risk of developing breast and prostate cancer. That's a lot. That's very significant. And that's a hidden poison that most people cannot see. And so it's best to combine all of these things with blue blocking glasses, which have kind of been trending in the alternative health community for a reason, because they work, but definitely don't go to Amazon or eBay. I've seen a lot of people try to skimp out and get $5 or $10 glasses with clear lenses and say they're blocking blue light, but they never tested them. And a lot of these are very cheap. They're from China and they don't block out blue light. And you can see that by just searching the color blue, and it should appear black. But through these glasses, if they don't work, it will appear blue still, which means you wasted your money. So it's better generally with health to spend money on things that work. I learned that the hard way, where I tried to save money buying cheaper products, off-brand, all that sort of thing. It doesn't usually work out, and you end up spending double since the thing breaks quickly or it's just ineffective. So on my website, I have the carbon shade blue blocking glasses. Those are my favorites. They work. They're red, and I think they're working on coming out with some more like daytime ones, which allow you to actually see colors while they're blocking green and blue light, which does the most harm. So there's a circadian aspect to this, circadian rhythm aspect. We know that night shift workers or ER nurses have higher incidences of all disease because their circadian rhythm is off. So we're not like rats where we have, we're active at night and we sleep during the day. We are diurnal creatures, which means that we're active during the day and we're meant to rest at night. But now we have nightclubs and bars and downtown in this party kind of culture where the night, it just begins at 10 p.m. and people don't get finished till 3-4 a.m. I've seen this, and that is a recipe for cancer and many other diseases. So wearing blue blocking glasses can help to mitigate to some degree, but if you wear red lenses, then it's just going to shut your brain off and start the production of melatonin, and you'll get sleepy. And so I always recommend, if someone's a night shift worker, just wearing yellow glasses can help to protect their brain somewhat, but you're still doing harm. And so I like to get to bed at least by 11. Midnight is the absolute max, but I don't feel the greatest the next day. But anything past midnight in the next day, I'm just way less productive, and I know it. But if you can get to bed by 11 p.m., that's practical for most people. Even better if it's 10:30 or 10 even. But 10:30 to 11 is usually most practical for people. So there's a circadian rhythm aspect to disease that is very important, because there are proteins that mark cells for death. There's one called ubiquitin, and that is a circadian rhythm controlled protein. And so there's this symphony of release of proteins in our body that happens in response to light and darkness. And darkness is a stress. So some people that are extremely compromised, before bed doing some red light therapy, like with the Gemba red light, it's very powerful. That can help to suppress the stress response. Also having some carbohydrate to support liver glycogen to get them through the night. That can also be very beneficial. But that's a problem when someone has prolonged periods of darkness. Let's say the sun goes down at 7 and they don't get to bed until 1 or 2 a.m. That's a long time of darkness. And that alone could be stressful to the body. So that's another aspect of why it's healthy to go to bed earlier, because you have less period of darkness before going to sleep, which is its own kind of protective mechanism from the darkness. So light is huge. I just wanted to spend a lot of time on that because that's so overlooked. Switch out the bad lights, put in red and orange, even yellow bulbs. Use as many Gemba red lights, various ones, as you can. I've even used the Gemba red groove to light up the entire house before, and that's possible. I mean, the LEDs last for thousands and thousands of hours. The next aspect is non-native EMF, and this kind of goes hand in hand because light is a form of electromagnetic radiation, and people think of 5G and Wi-Fi and cell phone radiation, but they don't think of light as a non-native EMF source. And it truly is. And it's harmful when it hits the skin and the photoreceptors in your skin or the photoreceptors in your eye. And that's linked to macular degeneration, so-called age-related, which isn't age-related. And that reacts with the omega-3 breakdown products in the eyes and with excess serotonin to cause macular degeneration. The prevention for that is vitamin E. Vitamin E and red light are excellent for the eyes. Artificial blue light plus omega-3s is a recipe for disaster for the eyes. Total breakdown, cataracts, the whole deal. So with non-native EMF, this is another huge contributor to cancer. That's well known. It acts on the voltage-gated calcium channels to open them up. And not only calcium floods into the cell, but also iron, which we'll get into later, which is maybe the primary cause of cancer. But all of these contribute. And iron makes you an antenna. While we're on the topic of Wi-Fi and 5G, all these people with iron overload in their body, they are an antenna to the EMF. And so going back to those people that I visited that had cancer, they were usually in a complex of some sort. It's an apartment complex or, almost factory farm houses, very close together housing. And the problem with that is that there are smart meters, usually a lot, and every home in the vicinity, each person probably has 6, 7, 8 electronics, multiple things plugged in. And the more things you have plugged in, the more voltage that goes onto the wires and through the grid. And so if you want to get into more detailed science on that, I interviewed Dave Stetzer on my podcast, the inventor of the dirty electricity filter. And he talked about that, how power strips, for example, in an office by an office worker's feet, that's a very big problem because every new thing you plug in, you're putting more voltage on the wire and you get more dirty electricity shooting into the room or emitting into the room. So there's various different things to consider with EMF. I'd say dirty electricity is kind of the easiest to mitigate. And for me, it was a palpable reduction in stress. I rarely stay in a big hotel like a Hilton or something like that, multiple stories up where there's 50, 70 stories or something. Those are absolutely the worst because not only are you so far up from the earth, but you're just surrounded in unlimited, just countless Wi-Fi signals. These bubbles of pulsed radiation that does go in the body. And so Wi-Fi is different from dirty electricity, which is different from a cell tower. So there's multiple different types of EMF. You have electric, you have magnetic, you have dirty electricity, you have radio frequency, RF, many different types. And I usually point people to dirty electricity filters, magnesium bicarbonate supplementation. I'd say 2 ounces multiple times a day. Could even be done every hour, and that's very protective. The Blue Shield is very powerful, and that's a powered scalar technology, so it's not passive EMF protection, it's active, which means that it's actually a charged device, and it's very simple how it works. It's not blocking any of the EMFs. Every 30 seconds, 20 to 30 seconds, it's shooting out a bubble, a field that is a stronger signal than the non-native EMF that your body is receiving. And so it's just creating another signal, but one that's stronger and that is more natural. So this guy in New Zealand created this algorithm, mathematical algorithm, and embedded it into this chip that uses light to send out these frequencies. So it's thousands of frequencies in the human range that the body can recognize, similar to walking in the forest or a natural environment. We would get exposed to these, and the body prefers these. It's healthier for the endocrine system and for the immune system, especially in the context of cancer. And so it's basically an anchor. It's something that the body can recognize, and they have home units and mobile units. And so the home unit is the most important one. They have different tiers, but the plug-in is the first one. I think that's about $250 or so, and then it goes up to the Cube, which is twice as powerful, and then it goes up to the Ultra, which is the one that I use, which is the most powerful. So it gets times 2 every time you go up. But even just their starter unit, the plug-in, is very palpable. You can actually feel it. And the ideal is to get a home unit plus a mobile unit that you have in your pocket. Even going for walks around the block, you'd be shocked at what you're exposed to. You can get meters to read these things. Electra Health, I think I have on my website, they have the dirty electricity filters, but they also have a great meter that you can use. Unfortunately, it's around $300, so it's an investment, but if you don't measure these things, you don't believe it. But just walking around your block, this thing will max out. You'd be shocked, depending on where you live. So Blue Shield is an excellent technology to implement. It's not a full protection. I truly believe you have to stack all of these things, and for some people, it's still not enough. They have to get out of Dodge. They have to leave their home and move somewhere out of the storm, out of the EMF, hell that they're in, because the cities largely are just death camps. It's just concentrated toxicity. If you want to talk air, water, EMF, toxic light, all of it, people are just getting slammed in the city. And so we do our best. I understand. I've been there working 3 jobs, and you just have to be there, even if it's for another year or two, to save up or to find another job in a better environment or whatever. I get it, but it's really, really important to start mitigating now, because once you have a disease like cancer, it's too late, and that's not where you want to start. And so, if anything, this podcast hopefully will help people with the preventative side of health, just to prevent getting any kind of horrible disease. So we talked about Stetzer filters, Blue Shield, magnesium bicarbonate. Another really powerful tool is the Magnetico sleep pad. And I interviewed them on my podcast. That's a really, really powerful tool. It's basically magnets that you sleep on, but it's way better than Niken or any of the other magnetic products out there, because it's more natural. You're only getting exposed to one polarity, and it's pretty much just amplifying the Earth's magnetism up into you. And so we sleep on 20 Gauss. They have a 5 Gauss, a 10 Gauss, and a 20 Gauss. And this is pretty much creating an EMF bubble or a magnetic bubble that's positive around you. And it's my understanding it doesn't really repel non-native EMFs from your bed, but what it's doing is it's strengthening your system with a very strong magnetic field that's, in the case of the 20 Gauss, 40 times stronger than the Earth's magnetic field currently, which is 0.5 Gauss or half a Gauss. That has the effect of increasing ATP production, which is what it's all about. Mitolife radio, right? I'm mitochondrial focused. The mitochondria are the powerhouse of the cell. They make energy for the cell, adenosine triphosphate. People with cancer or any condition, even anxiety, depression, nervousness, stage fright, whatever it is, social anxiety, that is an ATP deficiency, period. They're not making enough energy in their neurons, in their brain. Heart condition, heart can't heal, not making enough ATP in the heart. And there's things that inhibit that, primarily lipofuscin, like omega-3 fish oil breakdown products, algae oil. Those combine with iron and inhibit cellular respiration and energy production. So, a little rant there, but the Magnetico sleep pad helps to increase ATP production, especially if you're doing other things right to maximize cellular energy production. So that's another tool you can use. And then also the Soma Vedic, I interviewed them early on. They have various units, and it's basically crushed crystals, precious stones, 20 to 40 plus. They're in this little kind of saucer shape, and that runs electricity from the wall through them, and it sends it out, and it's another positive field. I would prioritize the Blue Shield first, but I think they both work together really well. So that's even another thing if you want to keep stacking. And then you could also get EMF blocking underwear. I have those on my website, and that's really helpful. There's even EMF blocking clothing you could find, but the reproductive organs really get hit hard with non-native electromagnetic fields. And so these are silver impregnated bamboo underwear. It's all I wear, and they're very comfortable and very effective, especially for men, for keeping testosterone up and maintaining hormonal balance. So that's it for the non-native EMF. That's very overlooked. I think your home is easier to control than when you're out. But when I go out, I always have my little black Blue Shield mobile with me. It's their most powerful one yet, and I definitely feel it when I have it with me. All right, next up is water. And not only drinking water, but bathing water. This is a subject that I'm very passionate about because I've tried it all. I've tried a lot of different filtration units. I went through my distilled water phase, my spring water phase, my well water phase. And for years, I was experimenting with drinking different waters. And I was measuring them with my TDS meter to measure the parts per million in the water. And just really diving in. And it wasn't until I found Pristine Hydro that everything clicked. And to me, that is the standard for drinking water. It's all I drink. And it is acid-free, contaminant-free, bicarbonate-rich water. So a lot of people only have one side of the equation. So if you get an alkaline water ionizer, you're getting acid-free water with all of the contaminants in it. It doesn't take the TDS down one bit. And then if you get distilled water, there's no minerals in it, no contaminants, but there's still sulfuric and nitric acid from burning fossil fuels and post-industrial revolution contaminants. So what goes up must come down. Burning fossil fuels, bunker fuel in ships, all of the industry that creates air pollution, which creates water pollution. So this has contaminated our entire planet. Even well water has huge amounts of iron in it, which we'll talk about later, iron overload. But most of the water people are drinking, even in the alternative health community, they're often waters that are being promoted as healthy. Spring water in glass that's very hard and or has high amounts of calcium, or definitely has sulfuric and nitric acid. If it's, sparkling mineral water or whatever, it's not filtered. And so it's going to have sulfuric and nitric acids in it from acid rain, plus high amounts of calcium, which cause calcification. Not ideal. And then people ask me, what's the best store-bought water? That's a really loaded question because there's none. Even all the bottled water is not ideal. It's in plastic. You don't know how long it's been sitting in the truck, leaching all that plastic into the water. There's acids in the water. It's leaching plastic. The best you can do is to go to a water machine at a health food store and fill up 5-gallon jugs there and get a water crock for your kitchen counter or whatever and put it upside down and use that. Keep the sun off of it. Keep it cool and dark, just like wine. That's how to store water. But ideally, it shouldn't be sitting for long periods of time. It should be moving, like vortexing. That's the ideal, just like it would be in a spring. And so the pristine hydrofilter, even their travel system in a briefcase, you can turn that into an undercounter, use that as your primary filtration. Even if you're in an apartment, it takes 5 minutes to install. It's definitely worth it. And you just get 2 5-gallon glass carboys, ideally. Even if it's BPA-free plastic, that's fine because there's no acids in it. But glass, of course, is better. And get your acid-free, contaminant-free, bicarbonate-rich water. So it's mostly magnesium bicarbonate that it injects at the end with trace amounts of sodium, calcium, and potassium bicarbonate. And those are the electrolytes that we used to get prior to the Industrial Revolution and acid rain that neutralized that HCO3, that bicarbonate ion. These electrolyte salts that run the body. So that's huge. And I believe it's super affordable, especially compared to, people are looking at whole house systems. If you want a whole house system, get ready to drop $10,000 to $12,000. You definitely want to start with point of use, which means, kitchen sink and your shower. And unless you are ready to drop that much money, I would wait for the whole house system and try to mimic the pristine hydro system with that. Because there's definitely a lot of whole house systems out there that do not produce drinkable water. So bathing is the other aspect. I would imagine that most people with cancer are bathing in tap water. A lot of the contaminants in the water are tetragenic, completely synergistic toxins. You can check out ewg.org tap water database. Put in your zip code and see what you're getting slammed with. It's truly insanity. I mean, think about it. In high school, I took a class, environmental class, and we went to a wastewater treatment plant in San Diego. And I saw what they did to the municipal water. And, most city water is just recycled wastewater. So people go poop or they pee, that goes down the drain, and then it gets recycled, it gets treated, right? But when they treat it, these tons of toxic chemicals, not just chlorine, chloramine, which is chlorine plus ammonia, which is super toxic. They don't just use fluoride, they use hydrofluorosilicic acid, which makes fluoride look like Kool-Aid. Very, very, very toxic stuff. So you're bathing in these chemicals, you're absorbing them, trace amounts of pharmaceuticals, transdermal absorption of pharmaceuticals, subclinical doses, unknown synergistic toxicity. No wonder someone has a disease bathing in tap water. Solution is about $170 for the year. I think that's pretty affordable. And that's the dual KDF shower filter. I have that on my website. And that's very effective. It even reduces fluoride quite a bit, almost 100%. It also changes the iron to make it less toxic. So you're getting less iron absorbed. And it removes a ton of contaminants. So that's a really, really important thing to do with water. And like I said, do your best. If you can't afford a pristine hydro system yet, and you're saving up for it, then health food store, water dispenser. Just avoid, the big chain stores, those water dispensers, because that's not going to be as good as the ones at the health food store. And even better than that, you find a water store. And we had these in San Diego. I think in big cities they have them. They're little, basically, oases where you can go and fill up at a station, either outside or inside the store. And the one in San Diego in Ocean Beach, it was the entire room was the filter. So that's definitely the way to go until you can afford a pristine hydro setup. But water is so overlooked. I would not waste my money on an alkaline water ionizer. I think those are total scams. They're multi-level marketing, which says a lot right there. So the markup is insane. And you would be better spending your money on a pristine hydro system and getting a shower filter for 1/4 the cost what you would spend on a alkaline water ionizer. So food is the next one, and this is usually what people start with, but they go the wrong direction with it. In the context of cancer, we are really looking at mineral imbalance. So there's a huge burden of oxidative stress, which is creating a huge magnesium burn rate. So the rate at which you are using up your magnesium. And that's not good because it's called Mag-ATP. It's complexed with adenosine triphosphate, the energy currency of the body. So to make energy, just like you need thyroid hormone, T3, active thyroid hormone, you also need magnesium. And most people do not have both, which is why they have poor energy production and they get fatigued easily, they get frustrated easily, fly off the handle easily, because they're magnesium deficient and they don't have enough cellular energy. They're always stressed. And so really mineral balance with food should be emphasized. And people go the wrong direction with this and say fruits and vegetables have minerals and, avoid animal products because they're acidic and they're going to contribute to, cancer or whatever disease. And I know that there's different types of cancer, but with this episode, the context is that the body can heal itself when you give it what it needs and you take away what it doesn't. So we don't need to get into the weeds of this or that type of cancer. I'm just talking kind of generality here, what I would do first before I get into other things. And so I would really look at magnesium, copper, and iron. As Morley Robbins has said on my podcast, there are a lot of minerals, but there are only 3 that really matter: magnesium, copper, and iron. And most people have huge imbalance with those 3 because they have way too much iron from eating iron filings in their cereal growing up. Iron fortified food started after World War II. It was an intentional poisoning of the people, and that accumulates in the body. it gets stuck in the macrophages and it can't leave because you're deficient in copper and the iron doorway shuts, ferroportin, and the iron can't get out. And so it just builds and builds and builds and builds until you get something like cancer. And so iron fortified foods is just one of them. How about modern agriculture and the way that we grow our vegetables? NPK fertilizer, Justus von Liebig, that whole story where the fertilizer was switched. There was this chemist that said there's only 3 minerals in the food. They framed them, sent the fertilizer worldwide, gave humanity 3 minerals, nitrogen, phosphate, potassium, and then they added to alkalize the soil, calcium hydroxide. And that wiped out a ton of life in the soil. And then acid rain fell and it killed and mutated the acidic and alkaline microbes in the soil. The NPK fertilizer wiped out the fungal mycorrhizae in the soil, and all of the multiple thousands of different types of bacteria in the soil, those were killed too. So they wiped out the entire nitrogen cycle, and people say vegetables are helpful to reverse cancer, and that's insane to me. Even organic vegetables are toxic, not beneficial for any disease. The fiber does have a benefit at reducing recirculating estrogen and having general hormonal balance from that, but I believe you can do that even safer with spore-based probiotics, spore-forming probiotics. But I believe vegetables should be minimized. That's the opposite of what people do with diseases. But really supporting the metabolism. And that's not skipping breakfast and eating carbohydrates with protein at every meal. And a protein is anything with eyes. So meat, basically eggs, dairy, shellfish, red meat. I believe that poultry should be limited. So white meat, pork, and chicken are high in polyunsaturated fatty acids, which do contribute to the formation of tumors and cancer development. And so that's a whole nother aspect, is lowering the PUFA intake. And that's what I would highlight under this section on food in the context of cancer, is really limit polyunsaturated fatty intake to under 4 grams a day, ideally. And saturated fat is safe. Saturated fat and cholesterol are good for the human being. Ansel Keys and that whole myth that the data was cherry-picked, that heart disease is caused by animal fats and saturated fat. That was a ploy which worked to get the American people onto PUFAs, or unsaturated fats. So really minimize PUFA intake as much as possible. And when someone does that with iron overload, they'll find that their symptoms are less irritating, they're less intense, because the polyunsaturated fatty acids combine with iron to create age pigment or ceroid called lipofuscin, or progressive lipofuscinosis, which has connections to muscular dystrophy, all sorts of different diseases, Alzheimer's. They prevent the cell from being able to breathe. So not good. And I'm not going to really go into the obvious things, highly processed foods from your grocery store, synthetic colors, obviously stop all of the sodas, because it's mostly the chemicals in with the processed foods that causes the issues. It's not the sugar, it's not the usual suspects, it's just the insane amount of ingredients and artificial colors and flavors that causes a lot of imbalance in the body. I want to finish up on food here by saying avoid green juice like the plague. The green juice is pretty much a chemical lobotomy, especially of the pineal gland. It just completely obliterates the brain because you're getting concentrated inorganic minerals in that juice, in that vegetable juice, that celery juice. They're non-carbon bonded or carbon based. They're non-carbon bonded. That's the definition in an inorganic mineral. And those accumulate in the body and cause every disease. Primarily calcification, which is part of my CLF protocol that I created to address that, which is essentially magnesium and K27 play a big role there. So if you want to do fruit juice, if I had cancer, I would do fruit juice, orange juice, just fruit juices in general. I feel that those would be beneficial, way better than vegetable juice. Air is another one. I just want to touch on this one real quick. Obviously, keeping the windows open to let in natural light and fresh air, even in the city, would be helpful. And having hypoallergenic air filters would help a lot. Even their smaller units, even just one in the bedroom where the person's primarily spending their time if they're extremely sick, could be very beneficial. And they shoot out two different types of particles that bind to pollutants in the air, viruses, VOCs, multiple different things, bacteria, and they actually clean surfaces. So they'll clean doorknobs and surfaces of counters just by running it in the room. So I take that Air Angel with me when I travel. That's like for a small space, I think 200 square feet or so. And that's a really great way to really neutralize, especially the volatile organic compounds, the synthetic ones that are off-gassing from plastics and the paint and the walls. I've been in houses before where I immediately start tearing up or my throat closes up just because of the insane amount of air pollutants, because they're having all the windows closed all the time, I can tell. And it's just a death chamber of poisonous gases. So opening the window, letting that stuff vent out, that's a free way to do it. But ideally, if it's cold or you want to shut the windows for noise or whatever, having the Air Oasis hypo air filters is a really great way to go. And even just at your, AmVets or whatever little used store, getting a HEPA filter. You can usually find them used at Goodwill or something like that. Honeywell, I believe, is the one I started with. Honeywell HEPA filter. And it's just this little round thing, and you could order the filters new online very cheaply. And it's just a little carbon filter, and just sucking in all of those particulates in a very, very basic HEPA filter can also make a huge difference with the immune system. It's less of a strain, a constant strain on the immune system, breathing in all of those allergens and particulates, which are largely dead skin cells. So it's kind of gross. So I want to talk about iron overload in relation to copper. I have a book here recommended by one of my return guests, Morley Robbins, called Soil, Grass, and Cancer: The Link Between Human and Animal Health and the Mineral Balance of the Soil. And this is a really, really great book that talks about the relationship between minerals and insulin and potassium and magnesium and their roles in various different conditions. Chapter 26 is called Copper Deficiency Upsets the Synthesis of Catalase. So that's the creation of the fundamental defense enzyme called catalase. So that's one of the major endogenous antioxidants that your body makes that is completely dependent on copper. And one study, Schultz, 1941, studied the effect of copper deficiency on various tissues, those of the liver and the blood. and they found that the activity of liver catalase fell sharply, actually reducing it by 50%. And so just, imagine having all this oxidative stress, someone dealing with cancer or some disease like that, and having iron overload at the same time. Their body has no way to counter it with endogenous antioxidants. And I feel like that's why people jump to, alkaline ionized water, an alkaline diet. It's like antioxidants, slam the antioxidants, neutralize the oxidation. It's like, how about we start at the most logical level, which is putting out the fire instead of just dumping tons of water on the fire that's just raging. Let's try to put it out at the root level. And that means lowering your iron overload. And that can be done in 3 ways. Number 1 is blood donation, or getting blood tests frequently, every 3 months, but just getting an assessment, the full Monty iron panel, to see especially where your iron saturation percent is. The closer your iron saturation is to 50%, the higher the chance of cancer. And I would bet that every person with cancer has iron saturation close to that 50% or even more, which is a big problem. So blood donation every 3 months in an extreme scenario. Next is bioavailable copper, not copper supplementation, but getting it from food sources. So that is a ruminant liver, a bison liver, grass-fed beef liver. That has a copper to iron ratio of 30-1. So it's 30 times the copper of the iron. It's a natural source of bioavailable copper. They make desiccated liver capsules. I have those on my website, or you can get it fresh from various websites. I know US Wellness Meats that I have on my website sells it. Ideally, get it local. Whole food vitamin C is a major source. So berries are excellent. You can get amla or camu berry capsules. Purely C by North American Urban Spice is really good. And also bee pollen. So those are 3 sources of bioavailable copper. And then the third thing I would recommend overall for iron overload is shilajit. I have a product called Panacea that is purified shilajit tablets in 200 milligram doses. So each tablet is 200 milligrams. And I personally take at least 5 a day. It goes really well with milk or with coffee. And while we're on that subject, that's another benefit of coffee. It inhibits iron overload. Besides making you more creative and having more mental power, it actually inhibits iron absorption. Whereas orange juice actually increases it. So orange juice should generally be drank away from meals or right before a meal is good. But you can use coffee with meals, say with your meat, or just in general every day. That's part of its longevity effects, is by inhibiting iron absorption. So I'd say coffee is a huge source of antioxidants, also a source of magnesium, multiple minerals, especially if it's brewed in pristine water. I used to do French press, and now I have a DeLonghi La Specialista espresso machine that works really well, and it's just very easy to use. Always fresh ground beans. There's just, again, with water, there's levels to coffee as well. Someday I might do an episode just on coffee alone because I love it. But that's it for iron overload and copper status. Just listen to my podcast with Morley Robbins. I have 5 of them so far with him. And it's a big deal. And it's not only a contributor to cancer, but also diabetes and heart disease and liver disease and all sorts of problems. It is caused by excess iron. So all of that said, you can use other tools. I believe magnesium bicarbonate should be emphasized in the context of cancer. I do personally, if I would do 2 to 3 ounces every single hour. If I had loose stools, maybe I'd back off to 1 ounce an hour or find the dose that works. But that is extremely, extremely beneficial, not only for the entire body, but for the pancreas especially. Vitamin E and vitamin K27 are often widely deficient. A and D can be had from animal foods, raw dairy, raw milk, grass-fed butter, raw cheese, aged cheese, A and D, retinol, true vitamin A, and vitamin D are very easy to get. I mean, even getting sunlight, ideally you take your vitamin E before you get sun exposure in a balanced way, not all day, but as much of your body exposed for a short period of time. And you could pre-dose with red light, actually. That's a way to protect yourself from UV damage, is to do red light therapy first, or just get out when there's a lot of infrared early in the day and soak up all that, and that will protect you from UV-induced skin damage or cellular damage. But vitamin E and K27, those are two supplements that I sell under my brand Mitolife, PUFA Protect, and Purely K, respectively. Those are hugely deficient in the population, and vitamin E is a estrogen antagonist. It's an aromatase inhibitor. It really protects the skin from the sun, from the damaging rays, the UV rays. And they both support mitochondrial energy production. K2 has some really awesome effects, especially K2 in the MK7 form, on the mitochondria. And remember, these are stored in the liver. So most of what you take of these will get stored in your liver, about 90%. But your liver does 500 functions. So why not support that organ with what it needs? And if your mitochondria and your liver are working better, 500 functions that do a lot of things. I mean, it makes your ceruloplasmin enzyme, which allows copper to work in your body and allows it to express its 20 enzymes related to oxygen utilization. Molecular hydrogen is another one. I would say definitely don't use tap water with it or store-bought water. Pristine water, I mean, it's not harmful if you do use store-bought filtered water, but definitely don't use tap water with it. It's just defeating the purpose. But ideally, 1 molecular hydrogen tablet in a glass of pristine water, say 10 or 12 ounces, in the morning with systemic enzymes. That's another thing, systemic enzyme therapy. It's been used for cancer pretty extensively. I believe there were some doctors that got slammed for using them several years ago by the medical industry. But these are proteolytic enzymes. So they actually break down exogenous proteins that your body marks that shouldn't be there. So these are serrapeptase and nattokinase are the enzymes. They're little Pac-Men that you take and they circulate in your body for up to 12 hours, cleaning up not only scar tissue, but eating these proteins that were marked by your body that are not supposed to be there. So systemic enzyme therapy, if I had cancer, I would be doing probably 30 plus capsules a day minimum. It would really be dependent on my finances, how much I could do. But it is the more the better. Maybe 12 3 times a day would be a good strategy I would use. And systemic enzymes are just so overlooked. That's why I have the CLF protocol: calcification, lipofuscin, fibrosis. If you address those 3 areas, then you have increased energy production throughout your entire body, increased functioning overall. It really is truly foundational. Last thing I want to talk about is mitochondrial uncoupling. And so really a hallmark of cancer is switching to lactic acid or lactate production instead of pyruvate or pyruvic acid. And so that is when your body is switching to a fat burning metabolism, where it's actually utilizing fatty acids in the mitochondria. And that's a backup system that's not designed to be the primary system. And that backup system generates 50% less carbon dioxide, and it uses 50% more water. So you're using more water and you're making less CO2. Why is that a problem? Well, you get dehydrated faster and you don't have enough CO2 to maintain the structure of the cell. Because it actually maintains the physical structure of the cell, which then maintains its function. So mitochondrial uncoupling, it sounds like a bad thing, like separation, like that shouldn't happen. It's actually a good thing. Animals with higher oxidation rates have uncoupled mitochondria and they actually live longer. And it happens when there is sufficient ATP production. So there's enough energy, the mitochondria can uncouple, and it's actually more efficient at eliminating PUFAs, polyunsaturated fatty acids, that would be integrated or stored. Instead of being stored, they're actually kicked out if there's enough ATP production due to a high metabolic rate and mitochondrial uncoupling. So that's pretty cool. Certain things, aspirin and thyroid actually increases uncoupling, which has an effect of lowering lactic acid, which is a hallmark of cancer formation, and it increases carbon dioxide. So overall, just increasing ATP production is going to help with all of these things, but definitely eating pro-metabolic foods and looking at the body in a bioenergetic perspective can help as well. One of the more affordable things that I would use is aspirin, acetyl salicylic acid. I'm going to link an article by Dr. Raymond Peat below where he talks about aspirin, the brain, and cancer. And he links quite a few studies, especially about cancer. 2001 study, aspirin's effects on endometrial cancer cell growth, protective effects of aspirin in endotoxic shock, just its general protective effects on the entire body, and lowering nitric oxide, aspirin-induced apoptosis in gastric cancer cells, stomach cells, stomach cancer. Really, really powerful stuff. I think aspirin and caffeine are very cheap, effective things that I would use if I did have cancer. So just so many things we haven't heard about, right? But I think just focusing on maximizing ATP production is a really great strategy. And that's why I created my CLF protocol on my website. I'll put the link below to that if you want to read through my little article on it and see what it's about. But that's it. I just wanted to share my general thoughts because there's so much hysteria when someone's diagnosed with a condition like this, and there's so much fear, and I believe that's by design. And so I think just sharing practical, logical information can help to get rid of that fear. And ideally, we get in a place where we're more in the prevention phase instead of the treatment phase, because that's a lot safer and a better place to be. So that's it for today's show. Thank you so much for listening. If you want to support the show and my work, you can go to matt-blackburn.com. I have my blogs on there, all my recommended products, even some recipes. I have healthy gummy bears, pancakes, and PUFA-free or low PUFA donuts. And all my recommended products are up there too. And then mitolife.co is my brand of supplements. And my two latest products are the probiotic and endotoxin reducer and Purely K. Purely K actually just came back in stock. It was out of stock for about 3 weeks. That's a really popular supplement, and it's a really high dose of medequinone 7 or MK7. A lot of the K2 supplements, you'll notice if you look at the nutrition facts, it's MK4. which you get if you're eating animal foods. But it's really MK7 that's a lot harder to get. It's only in natto and aged cheese. And that's the one that has huge effects on the electron transport chain and increasing mitochondrial function in general. It could also help to regulate calcium, which most people have calcification issues. So it helps with that as well. So that's it. Thanks so much for listening, and I'll see you next Friday. Today's quote is by Andre Voisin from his book Soil, Grass, and Cancer. Relationship between copper and cancer. Copper is necessary for the synthesis of catalase, the cell's weapon of defense against cancer. Every cancerous tumor, whatever its nature, is accompanied by a profound disorder of copper metabolism, a disorder expressed in the mobilization of copper in the blood, whose content of this metal be more than trebled, in order to speed up the synthesis of catalase, a weapon of defense against cancer. Copper deficiency reduces the catalase content of the liver. Every sufferer from a cancerous tumor has less catalase in his liver. Copper deficiency upsets the cytochrome system. The cytochrome system in the cancerous cell is upset. Copper deficiency throws out of gear the mechanism of heme synthesis. The mechanism of heme synthesis is out of order in the cancer patient. Copper deficiency upsets the metabolism of the sulfhydryl groups. Metabolism of the sulfhydryl groups is upset in the patient with tumor, and substances that cause cancer disturb sulfhydryl metabolism in the affected cells.